Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to the round 9 of the Willhelm Steinitz Online FIDE chess tournament in 2020. Day 2 was, I think, very surprising as Magnus Carlsen didn't win many games. He faced in the round 9 Danil Dubov, a strong grandmaster from Russia, and Danil Dubov played, I think, a great tournament so far. Played really some great attacking brilliances, and today he faced the world champion Magnus Carlsen. And let's see now what happened, because this was one of the decisive games of this tournament. If Magnus Carlsen, for instance, loses this game, then Danil Dubov would take the lead in the tournament. So let's check out what happened. Knight to f3 played by Danil Dubov. We have knight to f6 by Magnus, c4, g6, the King's Indian. After knight to c3, bishop to g7, e4, d6, d4. So we have now so far the normal variation of the King's Indian, Magnus castled, and now we have bishop to d3, which is a tricky idea already by white. Okay, the main idea of black could be immediately to play the move e5. But here Magnus played on a positional idea. The idea behind this move, bishop to g4, is to play bishop takes f3 and then really close the position with the move e5. The knight is controlling, of course, the e5 square. Then this position in the center will be static, would be really blocked out, and the main problem then for white would be maybe this bad bishop position, which after the potential e5, the bishop's activity, this bishop on d3, wouldn't be a great one. So in the game, bishop to e2 played by Danil Dubov, with the idea if Magnus now takes, for instance, bishop takes f3, then we have bishop takes f3, and then we would have at least this bishop on a very active diagonal, and then could maybe proceed with g4, h4, the common flank attacks possibilities against the fianchetto setups. So in the game, Magnus tried knight to d7, so again with the idea to cement our position with the move e5, and here we have bishop to e3, e5, d5 played by Danil Dubov, and now a5, which is also a common idea from black's perspective. It's similar now to the Peterson variation, in which basically after the move a5, black is trying to keep the position on the queen side closed. As I always like to say, and then as I always like to evaluate positions by the pawn structure in the center. So if we watch this 2 pawns from white's perspective, it's obvious that white would love to coordinate the attack on the queen side with some b4, c5 pawn breakthrough possibilities. On the other hand, black would love to proceed with this common King's Indian attack with the move f5. But there is a problem which I faced many times when I played the King's Indian. I'm still a King's Indian player, but there is something that bothers me sometimes, and it's when white stays with the king in the center or castles on the queen side. So the problem from black's perspective always in the King's Indian is the lack of harmony of pieces. Basically the only thing what black is relying on in the King's Indian is the King's Indian attack with the move f5. If we castle out of the attack or stay with the king in the center even, then black, I think, doesn't have so many attacking possibilities. So here after move knight to d2, Dubov forces really an important positional trades of pieces. After bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, we have now a new position in which white's dark square bishop has a great activity, and black's bishop, here of course the bishop by Magnus Carlsen, is blocked out by its own pawn. And now with the bishops off the board, for instance, if white would have castled, I just want you to imagine now the position. If white would have castled now into the king side, then black would love to have this light square bishop as a great attacker. After move f5, f4, then this will be really a dangerous attack. But now after queen to e2 and trading off the light square bishop, I think white has really a comfortable game, because white doesn't need to castle now into the common f4, f5, f4 attacks by black. Here after f5, Dubov simply cements his center with the move f3, still continuing the game with a very active bishop. And this bishop is really bad. You'll see the problems in Magnus Carlsen's game with his bishop. Knight to a6. We have queenside castling, getting out of this pawn storm here by black. And now knight to c5. King to b1, played by Dubov. We have a4. Magnus is trying to split the position somehow, maybe to play a3, then to weaken the pawn structure somehow. But it's not a problem. We have here really the normal move a3. And the problem from black's perspective is now that black cannot open the b file. with potential b5 moves, because there's simply too much. There are simply too much defenders of this of this b5 square. The knight, the pawn, and the queen are of course preventing these ideas. If we try, for instance, to crack the position with move c6, b5, then after something like d takes c6, the d file would be opened, and black has to face really the weakness on d6. So I really would rather be white here. I don't like black's position, I have to be honest. Here in the game, Magnus tried now rook to f7, trying to maybe double up pieces, or maybe trying finally maybe this c6 idea, maybe rook to d7, in order to protect here the pawn on d6. And Dubov now finally took f5. We have g takes f5, and now g4. Cracking the position immediately. Now it seems to me that really black is on the defensive side. With rook to g1, we have really some dangerous attacks. The king is a little bit naked here, doesn't have any more the pawns in front of the king. So here queen to f6, another defender in front of the king, but also maybe, but just maybe, with some counter-attack possibilities here on b2, because the queen and the bishop are building, of course, this very nice battery on dark squares. In the game, g takes f5, we have queen takes f5 by Magnus, and king to a2. This king is not endangered at all. If, for instance, Magnus tries something like knight to b3, we could play knight takes b3, not a problem. After a takes b3, we could take, I think, immediately after knight to c5. We would love, I think, to take simply this knight, the bishop takes c5, d takes c5, and now play a very nice positional move, knight to e4. I think this will be a great continuation for white, although you will lose probably this pawn on f3, but this knight will be very powerful with an attack on c5. This bishop is really, again, bad, so I think, again, white has a comfortable game. So in the game, Magnus didn't play this move knight to b3, he played queen to c2. It seems like a dangerous move, but here Dubov has really a nice idea. Rook to c1, queen to d3, and queen takes d3. After knight takes d3, okay, Magnus has maybe improved the position a little bit. Now we have really clear targets. It's of course the weak pawn on f3, but Dubov simply counterattacks with rook to g1. This bishop is, as I said, the main weakness in Magnus Carlsen's position. Knight to c5, we have rook to g3, trying to build, of course, the battery on the g file, king to h8, and now rook to g1. We have bishop to f6. Magnus is trying now really to find some kind of an activity of this bishop. The bishop doesn't have good squares. We would love, probably from black's perspective, we would love to trade off this dark square bishops, as this bishop, as I mentioned, by white has a perfect activity. In the game, knight to e4, a common idea, if we defend here from white's perspective, to cement the position around the square e4. We have knight takes e4, and now knight to f4. And here comes this very important moment, a very nice positional trades of pieces. Again, e takes f4. After e takes f4, rook to g4. And okay, this diagonal for the bishop is open now, but still this knight is much more better than Magnus Carlsen's bishop. This knight, the problem from black's perspective is that this knight cannot be attacked anymore by any minor piece. So it means we don't have any more, from black's perspective, a light square bishop. We don't have any more a knight which could attack. This knight is cemented, and now we have really a powerful outposted knight with which we can really build our next attacking possibility. So this bishop, in order to have some kind of an activity, has to be supported by a rook. So maybe rook to a6, rook to b8, rook to a6, rook to b6 would be sort of an idea, but rook to g1, g2 simply saves the position. I don't think that Magnus Carlsen has here clear attacking ideas. In the game, Magnus tried rook to f8, we have king to b1, simply improving the position of the king. Now it's time to go into a favorable endgame. We have b6, king to c2, we have bishop to e7, and now king to d3. You see how this knight is a very nice protective piece. Simply, it's very easy for us now to find really the best square for the pieces. We are now in an endgame stage, so it means you should play very active with your king. And still, you have always the possibility to play something like knight to c3 and attack also this a4 weakness. So this could be also an endgame strategy here by white. taking simply the pawn and go into a favorable endgame. So bishop to f6, we have rook to g2, protecting the pawn, of course. h6, you see Magnus doesn't have good ideas. Now rook to g6, Dubov is simply improving the position of the pieces. The h6 pawn is now hanging. We have bishop to g7, and now rook to e6, again finding a new great square for the rook. This rook is again cemented, and again I'm pointing out it cannot be attacked by any minor piece. The only piece that can attack this rook is another rook, so we don't have light square bishops, maybe the knight which can attack. Great activity here by white's pieces. In the game, king to h7 played by Magnus, and now knight to c3. Magnus has to take because his pawn was hanging. After king takes c3, we have rook to g7, and now rook takes, king takes, rook to e7. And if you try to trade off these rooks, I think we can here simply trade off and simply go after this pawn, and I think this will be a favorable continuation, as we can always play on some attacking ideas, or we can even try to attack this pawn with c3, b4, simply taking another pawn. Then we would have sort of a path of the king, and many great endgame ideas here for white. So I think white is completely winning here. So in the game, after rook to e7, Magnus tried king to f6, Dubov simply took the pawn, rook to e8, but now rook to d7. Okay, we have a check, not a problem. King to d4, king to f3, but now after king rook takes d6 and king to f5, of course, Dubov takes now the pawn b6, and we have now a new position in which Dubov has created a two connected pass pawn situation, and this is game over for Magnus Carlsen. This pawns cannot be catched anymore by this rook. The king is too far away. The king is also restricted by this rook on the 6th rank, so that's why it's a completely lost endgame. But in the continuation, rook to f1, not a problem. We have rook to b8, rook to d1, king to c5, of course, escaping. Now no checks by the rooks are possible. We have f3, rook to f8, king to e4, d6, simply pushing further. We have rook to d2, king to c6 played by Dubov, and here rook to h2, d7, simply continuing to push the rook to d2, and now simply promotion, d8, promotion to the queen, rook takes d8, and now h5, c5. Dubov has also another great pass pawn. We have h4, king to b5, f2, and now after rook to d1, here Magnus Carlsen resigned. This rook is of course waiting for both of these pawns. If you try to play more actively with the king, with some ideas to play king to e3 and then king to e2, you lose simply too many tempos, because white has really a clear path, and this is game over for the world champion. Okay, this was maybe a surprise in the tournament. Now Danil Dubov takes the lead in the tournament. He is a half of a point in front of Magnus Carlsen. We'll see, still one more day to play. Magnus has to improve, but also hope that Danil Dubov makes a mistake in the continuation of the tournament. But it wouldn't be a bad thing if Danil Dubov wins this tournament. He's also a great player. I wish him all of the best. But as I always like to say, I wish all of these players the best. Magnus has now won many tournaments. Maybe it would be cool that Danil Dubov wins this very nice online chess event. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from some other tournaments and some other tournaments from the last year. And you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.